This happened on Christmas Eve back in '97 when I was 7 years old. Since we're Jewish, we don't celebrate Christmas, so Christmas Eve was just like any other night for us. Our dad is a doctor, and since he's Jewish, he always works on call at the hospital during the Christmas holidays, so he wasn't home tonight. That just left my little sister and I by ourselves for the evening while our dad worked. Technically, our mom was home, but to be blunt, she was an alcoholic. Back then, being a 7-year-old, I had no idea what alcoholism was. All I knew was that my mom was always passed out once it got dark and near impossible to wake up. Sorry if it sounds harsh or TMI, but it's relevant to my story. My sister and I were downstairs watching TV when we heard a knock at the door. Being the oldest, I went to see who it was. Our door had glass panes built into it, which made it easy to see who was on the other side. There was a man standing outside in a Santa suit holding a bag, and when he saw me, he smiled and waved at me to come to the door. I went near the door but did not open it, and I thought it was odd that someone dressed like Santa would come to our house out of anyone's house in the neighborhood. He said, "Hey kid, it's me Santa. Let me in, I'll give you your presents." I remember point blank telling him that Santa isn't real, and that if he was, he doesn't give Jews presents anyway. That's when he said, "Of course I'm real. In the past, I only used to visit Christian homes, but lately, I felt bad that Jewish kids never get any presents. So this year, I changed the rules so that you can get presents too." But I didn't buy it, and instead, I remember getting mad at him, arguing that Jews get presents. We just get them during Hanukkah and not on Christmas. The smile fell from his face, and all his jolly charm disappeared as he began demanding I open the door. I told my sister to dial 911, and the guy seemed to run away. We did call the cops. However, unfortunately, the operator didn't understand what we were saying. Looking back, I think she may have thought we were just little kids excited that Santa Claus was coming to our house. Regardless, she didn't take us seriously, and instead just told us that this number was to be used for emergencies only before disconnecting the call. My sister and I now got really scared because we didn't know who else to call. Since we were only 4 and 7, the only numbers we knew how to dial were our home number and 911. And since this is the 90s, my dad didn't have a cell phone yet, and I had no idea what the hospital number was to reach him there. And with our mom impossible for us to wake up, we were essentially on our own. We hoped the man wouldn't come back, but a few minutes later, he was knocking on the door again. He said he knew the cops weren't coming and to go ahead and let him in or we'd be in big trouble. My sister started crying and ran upstairs trying to wake my mom. Not knowing what else to do, I did the one thing that made sense to my 7-year-old brain. I grabbed a bunch of candles we keep for our menorah and lit them all, then ran below where the smoke detector was. I blew out all the candles quickly before tossing them all up to the smoke detector. Thankfully, they gave off enough smoke to set off the smoke alarm. As an adult, I realized how stupid this was, and fortunately, I did not accidentally set the house on fire. But at that time, all I knew was that the smoke alarm would instantly call 911 for me and send help to our home. There was a fire department not even 2 minutes from our house, so they got here pretty fast. My sister came downstairs, scared of the fire alarm, but I told her there was no fire and to not go outside, but instead wait inside with me. To my amazement, the guy still did not leave. Instead, the bastard ran to the firefighters, presumably telling them that he was glad they showed up. I remember that he claimed he was my dad, and that he dressed up like Santa Claus for Christmas Eve to surprise us. He explained that his suit didn't have any pockets to hold his keys, and that with the door locked, he couldn't get the door open to save us from the fire, so he begged the firefighters to break down the door, and surprisingly, the firefighters seemed to believe him. They were actually getting ready to break down the door, and told us to stand back, but we started crying, shouting at them that he's not our dad, that our dad is working at the hospital and that we have no idea who this guy was, and that we don't even celebrate Christmas. The firefighter who was about to break down the door thankfully stopped and listened to us. He asked, "You don't celebrate Christmas?" I told him no because we're Jewish, and showed him my kippah on my head as well as our menorah. I then broke down crying, explaining how I set off the smoke alarm to try and get help because the police wouldn't believe us, and to please not let the guy in. The firefighter thankfully believed me, and then asked the guy why Santa would show up to a Jewish home. I don't remember exactly what the guy said, but the firefighters clearly didn't believe him. 2 of them wrestled the guy to the ground while the other called the police to come by. They also asked what hospital my dad worked at so they could let him know what was going on. The police arrived and arrested the guy, while another officer stayed with us until my dad came home and explained the situation to him. My dad was furious with our mom for being wasted and essentially sleeping through the whole thing, but mostly he was grateful that we were okay. As far as Christmases go, I was glad to have our usual boring and quiet Christmas the following year. To this day, I think being Jewish saved my sister and I's lives, because had we opened that door to let Santa in, there's a good chance that would have been our final Christmas.